Let us pray. O God, who by the passion of Christ, your Son, our Lord, abolished the death inherited from ancient sins, by every succeeding generation, grant that just as we are conformed to him, we have more and more the law of nature, the image of the man of earth. So by the sanctification of grace, we may bear the image of the man of heaven, through Christ our Lord.
Amen. A reading from the book of the prophet Isaiah. See, my servant shall prosper. He shall be raised high and greatly exalted. Even as many were amazed at him, so marred was his look beyond human semblance, and his appearance beyond that of the sons of man. So shall he startle many nations. Because of him, kings shall stand speechless. But those who have not been told shall see. Those who have not heard shall ponder it. Who would believe what we have heard? To whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? He grew up like a sapling before him, like a shoot from the parched earth. There was in him no stately bearing to make us look at him, nor appearance that would attract us to him. He was spurned and avoided by people, a man of suffering, accustomed to infirmity, one of those from whom people hid their faces, spurned, and we held him in no esteem. Yet it was our infirmities that he bore, our sufferings that he endured, while we thought of him as stricken, as one smitten by God and afflicted. But he was pierced for our offenses, crushed for our sins. Upon him was the chastisement that makes us whole. By his stripes we were healed. We had all gone astray like sheep, each following his own way. But the Lord laid upon him the guilt of us all. Though he was harshly treated, he submitted and opened not his mouth. Like a lamb led to slaughter, or a sheep before the shearers, he was silent and opened not his mouth. Oppressed and condemned, he was taken away. And who would have thought any more of his destiny? When he was cut off from the land of the living and smitten for the sin of his people, a grave was assigned him among the wicked, and a burial place with evildoers, though he had done no wrong nor spoken any falsehood. But the Lord was pleased to crush him in infirmity. If he gives his life as an offering for sin, we shall see his descendants in a long life, and the will of the Lord shall be accomplished through him. Because of his affliction, he shall see the light in fullness of days. Through his suffering, my servant shall justify many, and their guilt he shall bear. Therefore I will give him his portion among the great, and he shall divide the spoils with the mighty, because he surrendered himself to death and was counted among the wicked, and he shall take away the sins of many and win pardon for their offenses. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. In you, O Lord, I take refuge. Let me never be put to shame. In your justice, rescue me. Into your hands I commend my spirit. You will redeem me, O Lord, our faithful God. Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. For all my foes I am an object of reproach, a laughing stock to my neighbors, and a dread to my friends. They who see me abroad flee from me. I am forgotten like the unremembered dead. I am like a dish that is broken. Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. But my trust is in you, O Lord. I say you are my God. In your hands is my destiny. Rescue me from the clutches of my enemies and my persecutors. Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. Let your face shine upon your servant. Save me in your kindness. Take courage and be stout-hearted. All you who hope in the Lord. Father, into your hands I commend my spirit.
A reading from the letter to the Hebrews. Brothers and sisters, since we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold fast to our confession. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who has similarly been tested in every way, yet without sin. So let us confidently approach the throne of grace to receive mercy and to find grace for timely help. In the days when Christ was in the flesh, he offered prayers and supplication with loud cries and tears to the one who was able to save him from death. And he was heard because of his reverence. Son though he was, he learned obedience from what he suffered. And when he was made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation for all who obey him. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ, King of endless glory.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ, King of endless glory.
Christ became obedient to the point of death, even death on the cross. Because of this, God greatly exalted him and bestowed on him the name which is above every other name.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ, King of endless glory.
The Passion of our Lord Jesus Christ, according to John. Jesus went out with his disciples across the Kidron Valley to where there was a garden, into which he and his disciples entered. Judas, his betrayer, also knew the place, because Jesus had often met there with his disciples. So Judas got a band of soldiers and guards from the chief priests and the Pharisees and went there with lanterns, torches, and weapons. Jesus, knowing everything that was going to happen to him, went out and said to them,
Whom are you looking for?
They answered him, Jesus the Nazarene. He said to them,
I am.
Judas, his betrayer, was also with them. When he said to them, I am, they turned away and fell to the ground. So he again asked them,
Whom are you looking for?
They said,
Jesus the Nazarene.
Jesus answered,
I told you that I am. If you are looking for me, let these men go.
This was to fulfill what he had said, I have not lost any of those you gave me. Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it, struck the high priest's slave, and cut off his right ear. The slave's name was Malchus. Jesus said to Peter,
Put your sword into its scabbard. Shall I not drink the cup that my Father gave me?
So the band of soldiers, the tribune, and the Jewish guards seized Jesus, bound him, and brought him to Annas first. He was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year. It was Caiaphas who had counseled the Jews that it was better that one man should die rather than the people. Simon Peter and another disciple followed Jesus. Now the other disciple was known to the high priest, and he entered the courtyard of the high priest with Jesus. But Peter stood at the gate outside. So the other disciple, the acquaintance of the high priest, went out and spoke to the gatekeeper and brought Peter in. Then the maid who was the gatekeeper said to Peter, You are not one of this man's disciples, are you? He said,
I am not.
Now the slaves and the guards were standing around a charcoal fire that they had made, because it was cold, and were warming themselves. Peter was also standing there, keeping warm. The high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and about his doctrine. Jesus answered him,
I have spoken publicly to the world. I have always taught in a synagogue in the temple area, where all the Jews gather. And in secret have said nothing. Why ask me? Ask those who heard me what I said to them. They know what I said.
When he had said this, one of the temple guards standing there struck Jesus and said,
Is this the way you answer the high priest?
Jesus answered him,
If I have spoken wrongly, testify to the wrong. If I have spoken rightly, why do you strike me?
Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas the high priest. Now Simon Peter was standing there keeping warm, and they said to him, You are not one of his disciples, are you? He denied it and said,
I am not.
One of the slaves of the high priest, a relative of the one whose ear Peter had cut off, said, Didn't I see you in the garden with him? Again, Peter denied it, and immediately the cock crowed. Then they brought Jesus from Caiaphas to the praetorium. It was morning, and they themselves did not enter the praetorium in order not to be defiled, so that they could eat the Passover. So Pilate came out to them and said,
What charge do you bring against this man?
They answered and said to him, If he were not a criminal, we would not have handed him over to you. At this, Pilate said to them,
Take him yourselves and judge him according to your law.
The Jews answered him, We do not have the right to execute anyone. in order that the word of Jesus might be fulfilled that he said, indicating the kind of death he would die. So Pilate went back into the praetorium and summoned Jesus and said to him,
"Are you the king of the Jews?"
Jesus answered,
Do you say this on your own, or have others told you about me?
Pilate answered,
"I am not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and the chief priests handed you over to me. What have you done?"
Jesus answered,
My kingdom does not belong to this world. If my kingdom did belong to this world, my attendants would be fighting to keep me from being handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not here.
So Pilate said to him,
"Then you are a king?"
Jesus answered,
You say I am. For this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth, listen to my voice.
Pilate said to him,
"What is truth?"
when he had said this, he again went out to the Jews and said to them,
"I find no guilt in him. But you have a custom that I release one prisoner to you at Passover. Do you want me to release to you the King of the Jews?"
They cried out again, "Not this one, but Barabbas." Now Barabbas was a revolutionary. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him scourged, and the soldiers wove a crown out of thorns and placed it on his head, and clothed him in a purple cloak. And they came to him and said, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they struck him repeatedly. Once more Pilate went out and said to them,
"Look, I am bringing him out to you so that you may know that I find no guilt in him."
So Jesus came out, wearing the crown of thorns and the purple cloak, and he said to them,
"Behold the man."
When the chief priests and the guards saw him, they cried out, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Pilate said to them,
"Take him yourselves and crucify him. I find no guilt in him."
The Jews answered, "We have a law, and according to that law he ought to die, because he made himself the Son of God." Now when Pilate heard this statement, he became even more afraid, and went back into the praetorium and said to Jesus,
"Where are you from?"
Jesus did not answer him. So Pilate said to him,
"Do you not speak to me? Do you not know that I have power to release you and I have power to crucify you?"
Jesus answered him,
You would have no power over me if it had not been given to you from above. For this reason, the one who handed me over to you has the greatest sin.
Consequently, Pilate tried to release him, but the Jews cried out, "If you release him, you are not a friend of Caesar. Everyone who makes himself a king opposes Caesar." When Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus out and seated him on the judge's bench in the place called Stone Pavement, in Hebrew, Gabbatha. It was preparation day for Passover, and it was about noon. And he said to the Jews,
"Behold your king."
They cried out, "Take him away, take him away, crucify him." Pilate said to them,
"Shall I crucify your king?"
The chief priests answered, "We have no king but Caesar." Then they handed him over to them to be crucified. So they took Jesus, and carrying the cross himself, he went out to what is called the place of the skull, in Hebrew, Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with him 2 others, one on either side, with Jesus in the middle. Pilate also had an inscription written and put on the cross. It read, "Jesus the Nazarene, the King of the Jews." Now many of the Jews read this inscription because the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and it was written in Hebrew, Latin, and Greek. So the chief priests of the Jews said to Pilate, "Do not write the King of the Jews, but that he said, 'I am the King of the Jews.'" Pilate answered,
"What I have written, I have written."
When the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they took his clothes and divided them into 4 shares, a share for each soldier. They also took his tunic, but the tunic was seamless, woven in one piece from the top down. So they said to one another, "Let's not tear it, but cast lots for it, to see whose it will be." In order that the passage of Scripture might be fulfilled, that says, "They divided my garments among them, and for my vesture they cast lots." This is what the soldiers did. Standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary of Magdala. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple there whom he loved, he said to his mother,
Woman, behold your son.
Then he said to the disciple,
Behold your mother.
and from that hour the disciple took her into his home. After this, aware that everything was now finished, in order that the scripture might be fulfilled, Jesus said,
I thirst.
There was a vessel filled with common wine. So they put a sponge soaked in wine on a sprig of hyssop and put it up to his mouth. When Jesus had taken the wine, he said,
It is finished.
And bowing his head, he handed over the Spirit. Now, since it was preparation day, in order that the bodies might not remain on the cross on the Sabbath, for the Sabbath day of that week was a solemn one, the Jews asked Pilate that their legs be broken and that they be taken down. So the soldiers came and broke the legs of the first, and then of the other one who was crucified with Jesus. But when they came to Jesus, they saw that he was already dead. They did not break his legs. But one soldier thrust his lance into his side, and immediately blood and water flowed out. An eyewitness has testified, and his testimony is true. He knows that he is speaking the truth, so that you also may come to believe. For this happened so that the scripture passage might be fulfilled. Not a bone of it will be broken. And again, another passage says, they will look upon him whom they have pierced. After this, Joseph of Arimathea, secretly a disciple of Jesus for fear of the Jews, asked Pilate if he could remove the body of Jesus, and Pilate permitted it. So he came and took his body. Nicodemus, the one who had first come to him at night, also came, bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes weighing about 100 pounds. They took the body of Jesus and bound it with burial cloths along with the spices, according to the Jewish burial custom. Now in the place where he had been crucified there was a garden, and in the garden a new tomb, in which no one had yet been buried. So they laid Jesus there because of the Jewish preparation day, for the tomb was close by. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
After everything we have experienced, we have heard, we have seen in the scriptures, after everything we have experienced and see the things that happened to Jesus, then why do we call today is a Good Friday? We witness the fact that Jesus, in John's Gospel, that he is human and divine, but that he suffered greatly. The fact that people turned their backs on him, the fact that he had to endure every single accusations that did not make any sense. The fact that they choose Barabbas to release him and allow Jesus alone to carry the cross of that hill and crucify. And in fact, we experience every single nasty things in this whole world that Jesus had to endure on that cross. The innocent person suffered unjustly and condemned and executed to die on the cross. So in the eyes of the world, we cannot say it is a Good Friday. But in God's eyes, with faith, it is a Good Friday. It is a Good Friday because the cross becomes a sign of salvation, a sign of hope, and on that cross is hung the Savior of the world. On that cross hung the Son of God, who become one of us without sins, who humbly obedience to the Father's will, even to death. Every brokenness that humans being have gone or have endured, now is endured by Christ. The death that human being experienced, that now Jesus on that cross destroyed our death. And on that cross, Jesus gave us hope. On that cross, Jesus take all of the nasty things in the world and end on that cross. Every time we look at the cross with the eyes of faith, we see life. We see salvation. We see the good things from that cross. And today and tomorrow, the church commemorates the death of Jesus, but also await what God promised is the resurrection. So when we look at this day, it's a Good Friday. Indeed, it is good. Because the Son of God died on that cross to give us life and salvation.
Almighty.
Almighty and eternal God, who in Christ revealed your glory to all the nations, watch over the works of your mercy, that your church granted all the world may persevere with steadfast faith and passion in your name through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Let us pray for most holy Father Pope Francis, that our God and Lord, who chose him for the order of bishops, may keep him safe and unharmed for the Lord's holy church, to govern the holy people of God.
Almighty and living God, by whose decree in all things are founded, look with favor on our prayers, and in your kindness protect the folk chosen for us, that under him the Christian people governed by you, their Maker, may grow in merit by reason of their faith through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Let us also pray for Bishop Edward, and for the bishops, priests, and deacons of the church, and for the whole of the faithful people.
Almighty ever living God, by whose Spirit the whole body of the church is sanctified and governed, hear our humble prayers for your ministers, that by the gift of your grace all may serve you faithfully through Christ our Lord.
Amen. Let us pray also for catechumens, that our God and Lord may open wide the ears of their inmost hearts, and unlock the gates of his mercy, that having received forgiveness for all their sins, through the waters of rebirth, they too may be one with Christ Jesus our Lord.
Almighty ever living God, who make your church ever faithful with new offspring, increase the faith and understanding of our catechumens, that rewarding upon baptism, they may be added to the number of your adopted children through Christ our Lord.
Amen. Let us pray also for our brothers and sisters who believe in Christ, that our God and Lord may be pleased, as they live the truth, to gather them together and keep them in His one church.
Almighty ever living God, who gather what is scattered, and keep together what we have gathered, look kindly Beloved, along with your Son, that those whom with one baptism has consecrated may be joined together by integrity of faith and united in one charity through Christ our Lord.
Amen. Let us pray also for the Jewish people, to whom our Lord and God spoke first, that He may grant them to advance in love of His name and in faithfulness to His covenant.
Almighty ever living God, who bestowed your promises on Abraham and his descendants, praise you be you the preservation, that the people you first made your own may attain the fullness of redemption through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Let us pray also for those who do not believe in Christ, that enlightened by the Holy Spirit, they too may enter on the way of salvation.
Almighty ever-living God, grant to those who do not confess Christ, that by walking before you with a sincere heart, they may find the truth, and that we ourselves being constant in mutual love, strive to understand more fully the mystery of your life, may be made more perfect witnesses to your love of the world through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Let us pray for those who do not acknowledge God, that knowing what is right in sincerity of heart, they may find the way to God Himself.
Almighty ever-living God, who created all people to seek you always by desiring you, and by finding you come to rest, grant we pray, that despite every harmful obstacle, all may recognize the sign of your fatherly love, and the weakness of the good works done by those who believe in you, and so at last confess you the one true God, Father of human grace, through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Let us pray for those in public office, that our God and Lord may direct their minds and hearts according to His will, for true peace and freedom for all.
Almighty ever-living God, in whose hand lies every human heart, and the rights of people, look with favor, we pray, on those who govern with authority over us, that throughout the whole world, the prosperity of the people, the assurance of peace, and the freedom of religion, may through your will be made secure through Christ our Lord. Amen.
he may cleanse the world of all errors, manage disease, drive out hunger, unlock prison, loosen fetters, granting to travelers safety to pilgrims return, health to the sick, and salvation to the dying.
Almighty and living God, comfort of mourners, strength of all who toil, may the prayers of those who cried out in any tribulation come before you, that all may rejoice because in their hour of need, your mercy was at hand through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Let us pray, dear brothers and sisters, to God the Father Almighty, trusting in His love and providence, that He may continue to strengthen and to guide us in this difficulty and great need.
Almighty God, who sent out Jesus, your Son, us our physician and Savior, hear our heartfelt prayers for those who have fallen ill, for those who have died, for those who are vulnerable and fearful, and for those who were forgiven, that we may, sure in faith, strong in hope, fervent in love, and so spirit the grace of deliverance through Christ our Lord. Amen. Behold the wood of the cross, on which hung the Savior of the world.
Come, let us adore.
Behold the wood of the cross, on which hung the Savior of the world.
Come, let us adore.
Behold the wood of the cross, on which hung the Savior of the world.
Come, let us adore.
At the same command formed by the divine teaching, we dare to say,
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
deliver us, Lord, we pray from every evil, graciously grant peace in our days. That by the help of your mercy we may always be from sin, safe from stress, as we wait with us hope and coming of our Savior, Jesus Christ.
For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours, now and forever.
Behold the Lamb of God. Behold, he who takes away the sins of the world. Blessed are those who call the supper of the Lamb.
Lord, I am not worthy that you should enter under my roof, but only say the word, and my soul shall be healed.
My Jesus, I believe that you are present in the most holy sacrament. I love you above all things, and I desire to receive you into my soul. Since I cannot at this moment receive you sacramentally, come at least spiritually into my heart. I embrace you as if you were already there, and unite myself wholly to you. Never permit me to be separated from you. Amen. Let us pray. Almighty ever-living God, who have restored us to life by the blessed death and resurrection of your Christ, preserve in us the work of your mercy that by partaking of this mystery, we may have life seasonally devoted to you through Christ our Lord.
Amen.
May the abundant blessing of Lord, we pray, descend upon your people who have honored the death of your Son in the hope of the resurrection. May pardon come, comfort be given, holy faith increase, and everlasting redemption make secure through Christ our Lord.